Yeah. Great. Okay. Hey everybody, thank you so much for coming tonight. Welcome to Boston CSS and Vermont Student. We have a really exciting talk tonight with Alicia. Just a few logistical things before we start. We have, there's water, fridge back there, if anyone needs water. And there's also obviously pizza and beer and wine here. So thank you, Monster. Also, we are looking for sponsors for future meetups. So if you or your company is interested in sponsoring a meetup with me or Amanda, either talk to us here or email us through the meetup site, and we can go from there. Yeah.
Welcome to our first meetup of 2017. If anyone wants a seat up front, now we're going to have a talk by Alicia Sedlock about surviving burnout, I guess. And she is a front-end dev, currently a UI architect at Third Channel in Cambridge. And she also has a cute little hedgehog that you may see a couple pictures of during her presentation. Alrighty. Yay.
It is the first Boston CSS of the year, and this talk has 0 CSS in it. Spoilers. So thank you for having me. So this is the Wikipedia definition of burnout. It talks about psychological stress and exhaustion and lack of motivation, enthusiasm, and I think a lot of things we've heard before. And that's all dandy and good, but I think we all find definitions really boring. And I like stories, I like hearing stories. They tend to make things a bit more concrete for me. So I'll share with you my story of the time that I burnt out. I was, I don't know how many years ago now. It was in a galaxy far, far away, long, long ago. Where I was really excited. It was the first time I was going to be any kind of technical lead on a project, and this is something I was working really hard to get to. Projects in the past, I would put in extra time, extra work in order to essentially prove that I was ready for the responsibility that came with it. And so I finally got that, and I was super pumped. Felt like I, kind of got that approval stamp, right? We all like stamps and stickers and cool stuff. So the thing about this project was that there were a few factors, at least for me personally. I didn't have, it was my first without any kind of mentorship role for someone for me to look up to and say, hey, I'm not sure about X, Y, or Z. I was now that person. And so that comes with its own stress. It was also an extremely male-dominated team between both us and the client we were working with. I think on a team of 12, on a retail project, I was the only female, which was very, very jarring, especially given that our client was very alpha male-centric. A lot of meetings led into a lot of people trying to prove that their ideas were the right one. Myself being an introvert, myself being more of a communicator, facilitator, that didn't really go very well. I was trying to act a role it wasn't who I was at my core. And so there's a stress there, the lack of support. There's little feedback as well, and so I started to question, and was it the right thing to be doing? And so a lot of doubt surfaced, and eventually the project got so complicated and so off the rails that we actually brought more people in, including one of my superiors who eventually a lot of my responsibility went off to, without a lot of feedback in the process. This was kind of strange because everyone said, no, you're doing great, but we're going to have you do less and less and less. And so that kind of like set something off in my head, and I was like, well, this doesn't feel right. What am I doing wrong? So every night when I was working until 10 o'clock, I would think about that. I would think about, what am I doing wrong? Are there ways I can make up for it? And eventually we ended up doing, I think, 3 weeks straight of, 8 o'clock to 10 o'clock days. And finally one night, one of these nights, and I was working, and I finally realized that I was like physically shaking. And then I noticed I was like sobbing, and I was like, that's weird. And I continued to work. And I'm, doing this, and then suddenly I can't see because my contacts are falling out as like tears are like driving around my face. And I had like a minor nervous breakdown from this project, from feeling like I wasn't delivering, feeling like the responsibility was on me. And I was alone. My roommate wasn't home at the time, so I was by myself. And had it not been for text messages from my significant other, like begging me to stop working, I probably would have kept working all night, but I didn't. And the next morning I was like, what happened? That's not normal. And what was weird is that when I went to work, kind of after the project had ceased, going forward, and I would talk to my coworkers about this, and rather than getting a, wow, that's really awful, like, why did that happen? What can we do to prevent that? I got a lot of, yeah, I remember when that happened to me. It's really awful when that happens, but it's just kind of a thing that happens, I think, in this field. And I've been thinking about a lot since then. A big caveat here, one of many, I think I'm going to say throughout the day. Very different for everyone. What I just experienced or described experiencing may not be what anyone else here has experienced or will experience, hopefully not. But I think having a level setting of the severity that we're talking about is extremely important. Especially in framing burnout within the tech industry and how we perceive technical growth. Many of us have this battle between wanting to take care of ourselves. Self-care has kind of become a big topic of discussion within our field, but also the need to continually improve ourselves, which tends to be something that's put entirely on us in our free time. And that's both, I think, perpetuated by ourselves from organizational pressures. It comes from a lot of areas. A lot of times we think that, you're expected to do personal projects. That's how you grow. If you want to learn a new technology, you have to build something on your own. Someone has the time to learn on their own, that they don't have competing factors. They don't have families. They don't have other hobbies. They don't have other things they have to care about. I think also when we talk about growth and learning, and assume that someone's going to speak up if they're starting to feel that way. A lot of times, I've heard people in leadership positions say, well, I just didn't know. I thought someone would say something to me if there was a problem. And none of that's really the case. We all understand that there is no infinite time. We have other things we want to do. We don't want to be writing code necessarily all day. Some people can, and that's great. If that's what really gets you going, then that's fantastic. But that is not everybody. The idea of learning on your free time, especially when it relates to the benefits of your employer, it's kind of unpaid labor in that regard. If my boss says, hey, we want to build something in like React, can you go learn that like this weekend and then come to us and make a proposal? Like, no. If you want me to do this for work, why aren't you paying me on work time? And so I think a lot of people try to sneak things in that way, which is really unfortunate. And then there's this other idea that I can't really prove other than anecdotally and situationally. But I'm a very firm believer that our focus on culture fit and having kind of feeling companies is actually overall hurting us in that respect, because we also want technical experts. You don't get experts unless you're doing something for a very long period of time And so you have this dichotomy of, well, we want really young people and we're uncomfortable when older folks come in versus, well, we want someone who knows a lot. And so the younger generation thinks, hey, we have to like step up and like learn everything all the time, all at once by the age of 25, or else who am I? So we're seeing, I think, a good discussion, people being more forward about how this is a problem in the industry, which is great. Really excited about it. But why? Is it happening more? Is it because we're finally getting the nerve to speak up about it? I have a couple ideas why. Again, very situational, anecdotal, just from my experiences from listening to the experiences of others. And I would love if you refute them maybe later if you want to talk. So I think part of it has to do with, it's kind of this unfortunate part of our efforts to bring underrepresented folks in. There was a study done, I think in 2011, about gender in the workplace. Proved that female employees, and this was specifically done from a male-female counterpoint. Female employees feel they got recognition or the same respect as their male coworkers without doing 2 times as much work as their counterparts. And so when you think about burnout, if you already have a starting line where someone's already worked twice as hard to get there, going forward, they're going to be twice as worked already. And so I think that there is a relation between this that, I've seen it and I've talked to a lot of women about it, and I'm sure it applies to other groups as well. So that's one hypothesis I have. The other one, we expect developers to know everything, and I love pointing to this bus boss tweet, which I cackled when he first tweeted it, and then I got really sad because the same thing happened when Swift came out, where there were recruiters already asking for 5 years Swift experience within like a month of the language being available to the public. And so we expect, I think people who are in charge of organizations, they fear out on technical advancement and things like that. And so they're like, well, we need someone who knows every single thing here so we have the best judgment at the time. And I don't think that's helping us. As I talked about before, I don't think the inherent ageism that we have in this industry is really helping us. There's this thing about the 10,000 hours to be an expert, which by the way has now been disproved, thank God. But a lot of people still quote it as kind of like this pinnacle of how much of a professional you are at what you do, how much of an expert you are. When you think about the inherent older folks in a lot of companies, and then you take this 10K hours thing, a lot of developers are going to think, I need to get my 10,000 hours in as soon as possible. I have met someone who did that, who tracked them, who put in time on weekends to get that because they thought that was the signifier. And we shuffle around terms for it, like we have 10X now, like blah, with weird categories and phrases to justify it. And then the other thing is that information overload is constantly making us feel like we're behind. I actually stopped using Twitter as often, or at least reading it as often for this reason, is because I can't happening and then feel good about what I'm immediately doing. Because I feel like, I should maybe be doing that because so-and-so really awesome person's doing it. Being afraid that means what you're doing is now obsolete. This happened, I wrote Backbone for a very long time, and when that stopped being like the hip thing, I wondered if like I was kind of screwed. And if everyone would be like, well, you don't know like fancy stuff now, so whatever. And so it's a perspective thing. When you see people talking about everything else than what you're working on, you feel like you're the oddball out. And that's not the reality. And I think rationally we know that, but irrationally we freak out. So to kind of level set further on what we talk about with burnout, there's actually a scientific set of stages that occur with burnout. And there was a paper published in 2006 about it by two people with German names I'm not going to attempt to pronounce, but they are in the slides, and if you want to read it, that's great. But they were able to divide it into 12 very distinct steps that typically happen in order, but not necessarily. But I think they're a good starting point for understanding or starting the discussion. So the first one that usually comes up is the compulsion to prove yourself. And this is the desire to like set yourself out from everybody else to prove that you are the person that can do this. That's usually followed by working harder, putting in extra hours, focusing solely on work, thinking that there's going to be a benefit to it later on. People tend to become obsessed with this, and they try to, they do this to try to make themselves seem irreplaceable. Their project, whatever it may be. Eventually, because of this obsession, they start neglecting their own needs. Because they're devoting all their time and energy into work, they have no time or energy to devote to friends or family or hobbies. And they start ignoring eating and sleeping. They see it as unnecessary or not important. They see it as like, if I'm eating, I can't work, which is kind of the entire baseline of Soylent. So like, I don't know, Soylent, you're not helping us. Conflict. So they start to realize that something isn't right here. Like they're not feeling right, things aren't right in life, but they can't really place why. They don't place it on themselves. They don't place it on the fact that they're so focused on their work or that work is taking over. They don't really know where to place it. And so they start to experience a little bit of a crisis. This is usually when the first signs of physical symptoms appear, and they usually tend to be very mild headaches, small backaches, things like that. And then they start to transform what their own personal values are, as opposed to what they were in the beginning of anything. Valued their physical health, they might say, going to the gym really isn't that important. And their perceptions entirely change, and they are now not leaving any energy for anything else, hobbies or friends or things like that. And the job itself becomes the new value. It's the new goal. It's the new ultimate being in their lives. They may also start being emotionally blunt with people, just so they can get things done quickly and very quickly diverted back to their work. They start to deny that anything's wrong. They might become extremely intolerant. They may start to ignore social endeavors. They might start becoming extremely sarcastic or aggressive. They might blame things on, how much time they have, but they don't blame it like specifically on themselves. They blame it on things around them, but not necessarily relating to the demands that are at hand. So they might just blame like, I don't have enough time in the day to do what I have to do, as opposed to there's too much here for a person to do, which is a very different way of framing it. Eventually you turn to withdrawal, so complete isolation, become extremely by the book obsessive working. And this is usually when the feeling of hopelessness and no direction tend to sit in for the people. Friends, family, coworkers now obviously see that something is wrong. This is where things have stopped being solely internal. External factors, very undeniable personality changes. And then we kind of flip around. So they start to feel depersonalized from everything, that their place within the work that they're doing within their lives is actually not important, that if they disappeared one day, like nothing would change, which is a very different outlook than what we saw at the beginning of this cycle, where you wanted to prove that you were irreplaceable. Inner emptiness, feeling that like there kind of really is nothing there. People tend to oversatiate in either like eating, alcohol, sex, things like that at this stage. Typically full onset depression will kick in later on. Finally get to actual burnout syndrome. A physical or emotional collapse, usually needs immediate medical attention, and extreme cases, people might deal with suicidal thoughts, seeing it as the only way to get out of their situation. I think it's really important to compare that to, I think, what a lot of people talk about as burnout, but what is really called brownout. I think, and this isn't to dismiss anyone who is struggling kind of with the onset beginnings of burnout, but a lot of times when I've talked to people about burnout, it kind of ends actual burnout syndrome. Burnout refers to you're disengaged and you're demotivated, but you're not in danger of the emotional collapse of like the onset depression, of like the really extreme end parts of the burnout cycle. A lot of people kind of interchange the terms. I think it's really important to get them clear. Bore-out is another one that is coming up, where you're just kind of, you're bored with the work, and so, but like nothing else is really a problem. Like you're not overworked and you're not disengaged. You're just kind of like, and so thinking about all this now, just going back to, you know, reviewing what I went through, and I kind of wasn't able to make this comparison or realize what I was going through until I compared it to that cycle. You know, starting with, I had to prove myself. I saw it as working hard to prove myself. I eventually didn't feel valuable, started to doubt myself, and then I actually kind of like broke down, so that sucks. And so this is, how is it like really affecting us? And what is it doing to us kind of long-term, short-term? There's this great quote that's been going around for a very long time about the pipeline problem in regards to getting unrepresented groups into tech. And you know, it's a problem with the pipeline, but you know, the pipeline is leaking full of acid, and then it leads to a sewage treatment plant, and then it ends in a meat grinder, which is essentially saying that once you're in here, even though you got through the hard work of getting here, we're just going to chew you up and spit you out at the end of the day. And that is still a very big reality. It is why we still have problem getting women minorities in tech atmospheres and groups, and we keep pushing them away. We continue to treat burnout as a badge of honor, kind of like how I talked about when I first experienced it and was talking about it. People are like, "Oh yeah, like welcome to the club. Like this is what you do." We see it as a career builder. We see it as you know, people who start on this burnout path are seen as like go-getters, or they're extremely dedicated to what they're doing. That's often used as a way to, you know, give them raises or promote them, or essentially encourage the behavior later on. That if you entirely wipe yourself out, you will get rewarded from a monetary standpoint, a title standpoint. But it doesn't mean you're done. It doesn't mean you're not going to face that again. And we kind of just reinforce it, and I think that's why it's sticking around so long, because people still will willingly do it. I'm gonna take a break because this is a heavy topic, and this is my hedgehog Mabel. She's pretty great. Hedgehogs sleep like 22 hours a day, right? They don't snore though. She's pretty cute. Okay, happiness break over. So what do we do about it now? So we're in the shitty situation where it doesn't seem like we can really break this cycle. So what do we do? And there's a couple things here, and I want to talk about you know, at CSS DevConf last year in San Antonio, by Trent Moulton. And he talked about, you know, this topic kind of in a higher level, but he talked about like balance in work and like what's the actual kind of visualization there, like a way to like illustrate it better. And so I'm gonna steal his example for this. So this is a game called Reigns that, if you haven't played, is really fantastic. It's essentially Tinder for running a country as a king. But the thing about it is that with every decision that you make, so you have these 4 meters all the way up top that represent religion, population, the military, and overall financial stability within like your kingdom. And every action you take is either going to subtract or add to one of those. Maybe multiple, maybe none. But you lose the game if any of those get too high, or if any of them hit 0. If you have too much money, that means that the people of your kingdom don't have money and your entire financial collapse. If you have too much religion, I think they sacrifice you or something. But I think it's a really, and there's a link to it in the speaker notes to the slides that I'll send out. But it's really fantastic. Everyone do it. But I think it's like a really excellent way to illustrate that every action that you take, and I think it applies to life too, is either it's going to maybe add to something, but it's also going to take away from something. And it's a very delicate balance of adding and taking away. Other people have different ways to describe this. Spoon theory is another big one, essentially saying that every day you start with a set number of spoons, and every time you do something for someone, you give a spoon away. You can only give away so many spoons as you have. I like that one. Are cool, I guess. But there are many ways of talking about it and what we can do as people to kind of control those. So as people, how do we keep that balanced? How do we keep the balance of my personal sanity and like the things I want to do in life versus other responsibilities that I have of wanting to do well in my career and things like that? And the number one thing we talk about is saying no, and we all suck at it, and we all always say we're going to do it, and we never do it, because we always feel saying no is a sign of weakness or other negative things, or that you're lazy or things like that. And I think I'm just going to keep reiterating it, like saying no to things. If you realize that like your meter's on low, like if you say yes, it's game over. Like, so being able to keep track of your balances and be able to say no when you know it's gonna kind of like hit real hard. Being able to check in on yourself like throughout the day. How are you doing? Like I used to set calendar reminders for myself to take 5 minutes to ask myself how I was doing and to physically assess myself. I carry a lot of stress in my neck and my lower back. So I would always have this alarm, and I would sit up and I'd say, hey, does my back hurt? And be like, yes, it does. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to get up and not work for a little bit to kind of give myself that edge. Mindfulness is becoming kind of like a big practice in this regard, which is slightly different from normal meditation. Essentially, mindfulness is not to remove the pressures that you're feeling, but it's to sit with them and to analyze what they are, to really understand them. And so there's an app called Calm, if that's your thing. They do free guided mindfulness practices. They're pretty good. Again, you're not like dismissing your feelings. You're actually learning to understand them and learning then kind of how to deal with it. Part of it, I think learn in moderation. I think a lot of us get really eager to like learn a lot of things at once. So we're like, oh, I want to learn like React and SAS and all these 5 other things all at once on the same project. And like 2 weeks in, you're like, oh, well, 3 things are broken and I give up and like this is the worst thing ever. So why not just focus on one thing at a time? Maybe start with React and then familiar with. You don't have to learn everything all at once. This is why education takes a very long time to become an expert at something. And you also don't have to learn the brand new shiny thing all the time. Maybe wait for people to vet it out first. Maybe wait for the 1.0. Woo. Which I say because so early in my career when I was junior and stupid, I to use Backbone, but like Backbone was I think at like 0.7 at the time, and I was like, I'm gonna use it in production, and that was a terrible idea, so don't do that. Pro tip. So learning on extensible knowledge. So everything there is to learn about React, that could be a thing. Or I can maybe learn JavaScript. I can learn how to do really fancy stuff in Sass, or I can learn more about very specific CSS specs. I personally feel like if you learn the things that you can carry what new hip thing is happening at the current moment, time learning those things later on. Because I understand JavaScript fundamentals, I can use whatever JavaScript framework I want because I understand what's going on and I can debug based on that. As opposed to if I only knew React and then had to switch to something else, I might be really flustered and confused and terrified. What do people want you to know you for? I can't take credit for this question. I learned it at Write Speed Code in Chicago. So when you're learning things, so there's so much stuff out there and you could try to learn it all, but if there were like 3 things that when people were having an issue that they would come to you for, what would those 3 things be? And this is actually part of a discussion about personal brand and Twitter and blah, 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 blah. But it's actually really good to think about, okay, what do I focus on next? Do I want people to know me for like CSS animation? If that's like a thing I really want to be known for, then that should be on the list. If I don't really care about grid for CSS grid, then maybe I don't focus on that right now. Maybe I let other people kind of take that spotlight. So I find that as a nice kind of guiding dowsing rod or whatever to help figure out where to go next. Passive learning. So if you're able to do this, I kind of got a little overwhelmed by it, so I haven't been doing it as often. But as I mentioned, I used to use Twitter to kind of curate like what's going on in tech and kind of like knowing things that are out there and at least knowing them by name, but not having to dig into the details, I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for at least knowing like, hey, I know that's out there, but I haven't dug into it. It's kind of like the starting point that if you are in a problem, you know, find the scent. And the more kind of like scents you vaguely encountered, kind of like toward the deeper spots that you need to go. So just like seeing what other people are talking about, but knowing that you don't have to dive into those things. So the thing about burnout talks and blog posts and all that kind of stuff is that everyone talks about like me and my and you and individuals and never about how organizations and teams and things like that, and that is a crock of shit because that is only half of it. I think even though I was the only one that got burnt out, it was very much enforced by the group I was with at the time. And I've been in other stressful projects, but with different organizational support, it has not gone to that point. So this is a part I think is ignored and I would like to talk about it. More studies by more German people with names I can't pronounce, but there was also a study done on this and the disconnection between individuals and organization and how that plays in burnout. And it's kind of very similar, again, to our RAINS example. There are 6 major areas that they call out when they're talking about kind of like this work-life balance as it pertains to burnout. The first of those categories being workload. How much labor does a person actually contribute to each day? Does the organization see that as a lot of work or really not too much work at all or just the right amount of work? Control. How much control does a person have in what they do versus their superiors and the overall group? What's the reward for that individual? And what's the reward for the team? And what's the reward for the people who lead the team? What's kind of like the ebb and flow imbalance there? Do people feel a sense of community with the people that they work with toward the same goal? Or is it a situation where individual contributors and higher organizational level individuals are always at odds. You see this a lot with like the developer business kind of like classic struggle. And then there's fairness. Is everyone getting treated equally, and can everyone else see that amongst all levels of the organization? And values, and is what I'm working on directly contributing to what I value? Doing subgroup wants? Is it serving the mission of our team? And so I might come in and be like, for me, like a good spot is like a lot of work, but I also have a lot of control, equal amount of reward to what I'm doing. Community may be less important to me. Fairness still very important, and values can go kind of either way. So then exhaustion and burnout might come on. And so this could be a very simple scale for you to kind of, like, how would you put yourself on this? Do you think you're being worked too much? Is there like a lot of work there? Do you not have a lot of control? Is that what you want? There's not like a number that's right for everyone. Like, it's not saying that if your control is all the way at the bottom that you've lost. But it's just knowing like, what is it that you want and what is it that you're looking for and what's gonna make you hate what you're doing in the long term. And also just like exhaust you later on. So as leaders, wait, I had the wrong one. There we go. What do we do as leaders? So being able to take no as an answer, or like sometimes a lot of us as individuals are afraid to say no because we assume the person asking wants us to say yes. Like they've already come in with the notion that we're gonna say yes here. So it's, and I've definitely been guilty of this, where it's like, you're always like, yeah, they'll totally do it, they'll totally do it. And then if they just can't, because it's gonna push them over the edge, being like, ugh. So being able to understand that. Not assuming everyone's gonna speak up when they are feeling burnt out or exhausted, because that's not what's gonna happen. Again, they might feel weak or like a lesser individual on a team if they're speaking up, especially if the only way to speak up is within group settings. They're not gonna be the person that speaks up first. So do what you can to reach out and try to be more active in understanding where people are at. Set up for success. Are there insane demands? Can you do anything about it? Can you talk about it? Can you prevent unrealistic deadlines, or is that just kind of like up in the air? Are you making really insane requests from other people? And just kind of like taking a step back and really analyzing that and seeing if you're actually giving people room to breathe on a day-to-day. Personally, for me, having access to one-on-one meetings with leads or, I mean, in my case, like CEOs and things like that, helpful because I'm more of a one-on-one communicator. And so being able to have a more casual, go for a walk, talk about things, might be a better avenue for learning about these things than some kind of written report or some kind of like team monthly retrospective and like expecting everything to come out there. Likely in this situation as well, you'll be able to read between the lines a little bit more from what people are saying. So being able to more acutely identify, like, do they seem more disinterested now than when we talked about this 3 weeks ago? And things like that. If you want your team to learn, then you're gonna have to give them the time. You can't expect if you're not going to carve out time for them. I think a lot of groups will put it on developers to say, hey, we want to carve out this time to learn something. And I think it's something that leadership can be more active in promoting. Setting boundaries, understanding that like, whether or not it's because like someone has to pick up their kids from daycare or because I have to go play D&D like at some point, like those aren't greater or lesser like necessarily, like they're all boundaries. And being able to understand them, even though it might not seem important to you or something that's dismissible, it may not be to them. And tracking team sentiment for those who are very data driven. That kind of like 6-point level setting could help if once a month you feel like, hey, everyone fill out something that says like, how are you doing? Too much? Do you feel like you have a lot of autonomy? Do you feel like you have, you know, this, that, and the other thing? And trying to actually get numbers and see trends, if that's the kind of person you are. Mabel, I'm drinking water. This is during E3. She's really excited about Doom. So what do you do if you notice someone burning out? I think we talk about how you do for yourself a lot, but it can be very hard to sit back and watch others kind of go through this and not really know what to do. It is extremely delicate, and this isn't like the end-all be-all suggestion group. There's actually not a ton of really awesome information in this regard. So I'd love to see like more about like how people help other people in this. But I do start off with this. If you think someone is in danger of hurting themselves or someone else, you call 911. This is something I learned as an RA. This is something that therapists are taught for their clients. And I think it applies as equally here. And so if you have any doubt about that, please just do that. First of all, let them know that you think they're burnt out because they might not realize it. You know, when I was going through it, I definitely had a lot of tunnel vision and didn't really see the bigger picture of what was happening. And so I don't think I realized what was coming down the line. And so first, letting them know like, hey, you seem like really like overworked and really kind of like disconnected from everything lately. Like I'm concerned. Give them ideas, but don't give them exactly what to do. So rather than saying like, you know, you should go out and like hang out with someone or go for a walk, phrase it more in like what they call iMessages. So I've found that when I feel like this, me a lot. You might want to try it as well. It's a small difference, but within such kind of like high stakes emotional situations, it could be the difference between someone understanding and someone maybe going a little bit over the edge, especially if they're already around, and that's kind of what's contributing to what they're going through. Highlight the things that they do well traditionally. This is something that the people going through burnout will just like absolutely never think about. They're like, I've never done anything well in my life ever, even if they're standing amongst like awards that they've received for doing great things. So trying to remind them, and even if it's something small, if it's something big, just try to find the things to help them focus on rather than what it is that they're actually focusing on. Encouraging exercise and movement. So it is actually proven that these things and also healthy eating will help people kind of de-escalate. And it could be something as simple as if, you know, asking someone if they want to go coffee or just a walk in general. If they're more of like a casual coworker, if it's someone you're close with, maybe being like, hey, let's go take a walk around the block to like talk about X, Y, and Z, or like, let's go and do something. Any way that you can encourage people to do that is extremely beneficial. The other thing is don't take responsibility, which fortunate truth, but if someone is going through these things, part of it is going to have to be them getting themselves out. You can try to guide them in the right path, and that's great and dandy, but they might not latch on right away. That you failed, or that you made it worse, or that it's all your fault. And so that's something to remember. We are still figuring out this whole problem, I think, as an industry, not just us, but this also occurs in many other industries, nursing being a very big one. I think if we want to actually like stop this from being so common and happening at all, being a bit more public about it when, you know, it does happen. That's why I'm sort of like talking about this now. I don't like talking about it. I don't like thinking about what I went through, but I know that other people appreciate it. Helps people in the long run. So sharing stories and making it a priority again within organizations to address this and not leaving it to people to get themselves out of the meat grinder alone is very important. And I especially think with this year specifically, we're gonna need this a lot. So there's that. That's all I have. Thank you. I don't have any more pictures of me. Sorry.
I wish you the actual.
She would be so mad.
Does anybody have questions? Comments? Do you want to come up or do you want to go?
Just a question, actually. After you hit burnout, did it take a specific amount of time for you to recover to feel like you were yourself again?
I had to kind of wait until I was off that project entirely, personally, which I think was a combination of that and just other mental health issues that I had personally. But it definitely was not immediate, and the after were pretty rough. Like I tend to cry when I get like really stressed, and usually I'm like, okay, good, like it's all out, but it wasn't that at all. So it might take a day, it might take a week, it might take a month. Definitely took me some time. I think it changes with everyone.
Yeah, I was also kind of, thank you for sharing this presentation. I'm just in my second year of employment, and my first job was for a very small software company as their first ever technical writer. They had no tech writer before, so I pretty much took it upon myself to go through those 12 steps. And by the point 10 months in, I couldn't feel any emotion anymore. I even fainted once at a conference just like this one because I just couldn't take it. I had trouble sleeping. I actually snapped to my manager because it got so bad. My boss said, if you burn out here, you'll be slinging coffee for the rest of your life.
Yep.
That's why I convinced myself I had to extricate myself from this situation. So I found another job. I moved to this area, and it took me 6 months to realize what was bothering me and make peace with it, and now I was able to move on.
Mm-hmm. The distance from it makes you realize what happened. Like you're not gonna realize right away, like, oh, I just burnt out. You're just gonna be like, fuck, just like that. But yeah.
So you talked about it briefly during your anecdote at the beginning about how something that really exacerbated the situation for you was the lack of feedback, especially as the situation changed around you. How much do you think both positive and negative feedback from peers and from superiors plays into this? And what can be done as peers to fix this situation before it escalates?
Mm-hmm. So first half, so for me, the lack of any feedback in itself was negative feedback. Like I actually took that as they don't think I have the stomach for it wrong, and so they're just gonna tell me everything I'm doing is right. Even though what I see around me is changing and like constantly I'm being like told not to do things. I think it comes to understanding how people are receptive to feedback, which isn't like an easy thing to do. It changes with everyone. And I'll just say, because like you and I went through it, like I think the Myers-Briggs test that our company did together really helped, at least for me, understand that if I had to give someone feedback, how can I do that in a way that they won't be upset about it and that they'll actually like be very receptive to it. And so I think still to learn, but if there are things like that you can do as a group, or it's just also a thing that you learn by working together with people, I think teams that are more collaborative will have a better understanding peers amongst their superiors. So did I answer your question?
In my part, I think
Okay.
I'm also wondering about what we can, how much responsibility or how much ability we have to affect this process for a peer.
I think it's as much as you have the emotional capacity for it. Like you might be a person that doesn't actually care. And I'm not gonna tell you that you're like wrong or like a terrible person for thinking that, but that might just be enough emotional labor to like put you in the negative. And so I think that it's that's hard to gauge, and I don't have an answer. Don't know.
Given that there's a lot of companies, at least in my experience, that do subscribe to that mentality, that it's kind of a badge of honor. There's a lot of, misalignment between from non-technical folks about the, capabilities and skill sets of engineers in particular, and what they're expected to do. When you, first off, is there, like during the interview process or the early stages of being an employee somewhere, kind of had some red flags to figure out if that's an environment like that? I mean, obviously it gets to a point that I've experienced it several times myself. When it's gotten to that point, and then pretty much once it gets to that point, is there anything besides getting out that you can possibly do about it? And if so, when you go to that next step, kind of how do you determine off the bat, or not necessarily off the bat, but how do you determine if that's going to be an issue there going forward? Because it's just the more you put yourself in that situation, the worse it gets, and it can damage your career.
Right. I can only speak personally and not give like blanket recommendations. One thing that is another. So my first full-time job out of college, one of the things I was sold on was that there was a bar in the building, and like an actual restaurant bar, and it was like, yeah, on Fridays we all like hang out, or like if anyone's really late, and also like if you're late, like we all get Thai food together, and it was kind of seen as an activity of sticking around. I think that would happen because everyone was working late on projects with like really bad deadlines. I would be on a different project and I would leave and they're like, oh, but we're all getting Thai food. You just want to stick around and keep working on this other thing that is not time sensitive for you. So I've gotten a bit better on like trying to suss out if like that's happening. I try to what are kind of like the extracurricular things that happen? If people are saying, yeah, like we usually stick around at nights and like we have like all this stuff here to like keep you around essentially. I've become very wary of companies that have stuff that want to keep you there. If they have restaurants, if they have dry cleaning, if they have hair salons, if they have game rooms, if they have like all this stuff, that is a way to keep you there for longer because that's stuff you don't have to do at home. Personally, something I don't want. So there's things like that. Like to, I usually, if they don't show me, I usually ask to see where everyone actually sits to see, is it very conducive to not talking with people? Or is it, do I see people like talking about? And I look around, I'm like, does it look like there's collaborative work happening? Or is everyone just kind of like in their own cubicles? And I think it comes down to a personal style of what you're looking for, but I think the environment and say like, if I were there, like, would that drive me crazy? Or would I think that's really cool coming in?
Out of, you made a really good point about having things that keep you there. Google does this actually really well, is you can do all three meals. And that's a whole different thing. But to your earlier point, the first part of your question is, what are the red flags for the hiring process? People dismiss often things like Glassdoor, but they're actually really helpful.
Yeah.
And actually filling out things like that is going to be, there's a part of me that's always like, well, I know I want help, so I don't want to put anything on Glassdoor if it's negative. But go and look at the negative reviews. There's generally at least one person who's gotten so fed up with it. They might even wait 3 to 6 months afterwards, that's fine. And they'll just be like, here are the cons. I'm gonna just lay it out. We got real tired of this shit. And like a lot of companies they leave will try and make you sign something that says like, well, bad, not the company. They're not really enforceable through anonymous sites. I struggle with this because as a technical writer, I'm normally the only person in my role. So it's like, what did you do there? Well, like my manager accused me, like, probably, maybe not the best place to go talk about that, but like, give cons and you can give people a heads up of just like, these people expect you to stay late. They put it there, like, the beer fridge in my last company was a lie. They're just like, you can't touch it till after 4 o'clock. But there would be all these senior level people who would trudge there, muttering on their cell phones, grab a beer, and if you went and used any of like the pool tables or like drank the beer, like that was a negative to you. It was a trap. It was pretending to be a startup to lure people in. And like, you can, that's something that I could go put there. Like, it's a trap. Don't pay attention if it's a trap phase. Go back to your own company that actually reveal and leave information. Now, and if somebody really thinks it's not true, they'll be like, oh, that's not my experience at all. Let me write this conflicting viewpoint. You'll actually have to do some critical thinking, and that's not the worst thing in the world. I promise.
So
I
many
will
questions.
also like piggyback and say, after going through the hiring process recently, I point blank asked every single person that interviewed me, how many hours do you work a week? How much time do you spend at home? What is the work-life balance? You know, like, I mean, I have kids, like I literally can't work 60 hours a week. I have to work. You know, so and if somebody stutters when you ask them that question, then just turn around away. Like, they can't clearly and easily be like, oh, you know, well, I generally work 40 hours a week, but like maybe once a month there's a deadline, I work a little late. Like, fine, but you know, if they're kind of like, well, just get up and walk out.
Yeah, actually, kind of on the heels of that, like, if you are interviewing, one really good piece of advice I got was to hold it and put the interviewer on the spot. Like, if you are there, it shows that there's at least some sort of interest. And to like protect your own interest, ask, you know, what's the turnover? How long were they there? And like, or that like you mentioned, like that sweating it out factor. Like, that's usually to tell, I think. And then like, sometimes you can even spin that into like a positive conversation about, is this a problem? Is it an ongoing problem? Is this something you're proactively trying to fix? Or is it just, you know, danger, danger, danger?
Up in the back.
I'll also do that. I also know that if it's like, if there's something where you know, like, your job, like, you should just come out with it. So, like, I have a sleep disorder. Like, I don't get in early. Like, I'm gonna fail every time. If I have to be, like, very early in the morning or something, like, I will not make it. I have to just ask them in interviews now. Is it cool if I come in at 9:30 a.m.? Like, is that okay with you? I might not be, like, punished for this later. Because I have even had people like, yeah, 10's fine. And then I'm like, freak out. So, and which I have to like just be upfront now. Like, this is a problem for me. This is a thing. Like, I just say it now, and then I'm also in like a position where I had a few jobs, so it's a lot easier for someone here. So I think that's the advantage there. I definitely did not come out without my first 2 jobs, and then it's like I think I actually tell people like aggressively, this is a thing for me. And now I just like that's a problem, and I don't do it. So it's worked out very well for me now.
You mentioned a bunch about being in a culture where it's rewarded if you stay a lot of hours and very much appear to be a hardworking person. I think that maybe when you're focusing on aspiring to be that, it can be especially frustrating that you see someone else, which you don't see the work that they're putting in, get promoted in front, because you're concentrating so much on the work that you're doing. I think that's something that can be something that's pretty damaging to like, your ego and how you feel, especially when you go into that. Do you have any advice for someone who would be like seeing something?
So if you were on the I work a lot, but someone else got the recognition part of it?
Yeah.
Um,
You're not necessarily seeing the work that just happened.
I think that comes down to, I've seen that live in terms of like people in like leadership positions actually going out and highlighting the work that other people don't want to highlight themselves. You know, the people who do have the visibility of everything going on and everything that everyone is working on, it's up to them to really help promote that for people who don't want to promote it on their own, which I think can help with that. To be like, if I'm so focused on doing like this silo of work, I may not realize that working equally as hard, if not more, and having that actually outlined. So I think that kind of like the angst that can live there. But I also think that and you still don't think that the reward is being split very equally amongst equal work, then to just bring it up, which is very uncomfortable, absolutely. But if you don't bring it up, nothing's going to get better. And so at some point you have to kind of like put on, like, pull up your big boy, big girl, big person boots and be like, and this actually very much frustrates me. The first time around, it's very uncomfortable, but as you do it more, it gets real easy. And so there's that. Able to, like, if you can point to specific examples too, that's just gonna help better your case. So that's what I would do in that situation, at least.
Thank you.
So I've experienced this multiple times, and I'm hoping I'm hoping I thought that maybe I had a bit of guidance in that situation, helping the guidance, or you speak up and they don't respect what you say and they don't try to help, or you wind up to a darker place. I've been there. Some places truly want to just rub you out and let the people who just do the sundowning type of job get, you know, they're happy to let your job keep you just keep the road. When you're interviewing for the jobs, talk to the people about their own work-life balance. Ask what they're passionate about besides their work, and watch them light up. And or if they don't, I'm at a place right now where no coworkers like I know right now, and I'm scared all the time that, oh my God, it's an illusion. But they're amazing. And the interview with people that I've worked directly with was unlike anything I've ever known. And the way that I got the interview was one of my mentors told me, interview for every job, even the ones you know for sure you don't want. Interview all the time. So you get better at it, and you know that you're bringing it, and they're going to be lucky that they hire you. And the other piece is make sure you have things that you are doing. Like if you don't have kids, you're coming to meet up. Know that you're taking a jiu-jitsu class. Know that you're playing D&D. And leave. And don't be afraid to leave your computer at work. That doesn't involve coding like months.
I'm gonna sit because my knees hurt. But please keep talking.
Really?
I'll be really quick. I just have to say that there are like also good companies. Like I feel like
Oh yeah, for sure.
obviously like a lot of people have like some pretty like difficult experiences, and like myself included. But I've also had some really great ones where it's like, and I work here and I'm biased, but like no one really ever works past 5:30, and we have time we call it, and it's like it's time for me. And I know that other companies do that too, and I think that like, and it's like it's out there.
I've been at the, like, people have widely varying experiences at the same company.
Mhm.
Someone could be working into visiting burnout, whereas another person would be like, I love it here, it's great.
Yeah.
So it's actually may vary based on, not really necessarily the company.
Okay. Does anyone have any announcements that they would like to announce?
What's the criteria for announcements? I'm just curious.
Oh,
I've never been
well,
here before.
There isn't any like super strict criteria, but it could be like if you're looking for. I guess.
No, of course.
I'll shamelessly self-plug, and I'll even use the microphone. Plans actually run the Write the Docs meetup, which is focused, often open source focused meetup in the Boston area and actually nationally. And maybe internationally at this point. We had a Berlin. Was it Berlin?
I think it was from Belgium.
It was great. Anyway, in February, and this is a sneak peek for Paul as well, we should be doing a meetup focused on error messages and how to make them selfless. Oftentimes, we don't necessarily UX UI buddies as much when you all are designing. We put in just a standard error message, and we'd like to talk about how we can make that happen from both a writing perspective, make it better, and from a design and engineering perspective, because it really sucks that we accidentally send out an error message that has no meaning at all, because it's not helpful. And we've all run into them where it's either like, this is too big to display, and have to display for business the other day. Like, we have an error message, but it's too big. So that was very unhelpful. So if you want to come and talk with us about that, we might have some on conferences or another speaker afterwards, but we've only had one person volunteer so far. And I have more arm twisting to do, so.
Cool. Any more announcements, hires, people that want to get hired? So we are trying to bring a documentary here to Boston CSS. It's called Debugging the Gender Gap, getting more women and people of color into tech. It costs $250 to get the rights to show it. So if anyone has a company that wants to sponsor that, or if you want to sponsor it, right? Like, you can talk to either me or Meg, just in case that's like a value that sponsor for. Cool, thank you.
There's one person here with it.
Yeah, it was me.
Okay. Oh, Matt.
Hi, I'm Julie. I just finished WDI at General Assembly, and I'm a web developer job. JavaScript, HTML, CSS. I even have some design skills on hand. So, got a card. If you know anybody who's looking, come get one.
Thanks. We're going to be hanging out for a little while here. Maybe to finish up the pizza and drink more beverages and chat.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
I don't know how to touch it.
Great presentation,
Thank you.
Paul.
All this video.
Yeah, 1 year ago, almost in a few days, I was basically cried for help as a person. Literally checked in long ago without and no one to turn to. And reached out to me so I realized that we're not fit for every job.